Greetings and good morning. This is Ashley Marie Straw. I am Ashley Marie Straw. Ash in some circles, Asha, Coach Ash, in the Be the Tree Rites of Passage program. And at this point, I've already posted a video introducing the On My Mind online community and forum for story sharing about the recovery journey through mental illness and the experience of being a cycle breaker, breaking the cycle of generational mental illness, and the experience of being a muckraker, talking about how pharmaceuticals do not work for those people they do not work for. I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself, and I can say that that is a thing that I've heard from a lot of people. So my commitment right now is that I contribute to the story share by sharing my story and by answering the 4 questions that I requested that everyone who is submitting their story answer. So the first question is, what do I think of when I think of mental illness? And what I think of when I think of mental illness, I just considered how I was going to answer this question before I came and started recording. What I think of is I think of the first image that comes up for me is a man who walked across the street when there was no walk sign just before, dressed all in black, dirty clothes, disheveled, and sort of like appeared to be grunting at us I was in a car, and the car was slowing down so that he could cross the street when there was no walk sign, and he appeared to be talking to himself and grunting at us. That's what I think of when I think of mental illness. That's like the first thing that comes up for me. That was the first image that I saw when I thought, oh, what do I think of when I think of mental illness? As I've been getting deeper and deeper into the journey, I can continue to consider, okay, well, really, what is mental illness? And then I start to think about members of my family who have been medicated for being bipolar, or members of my family who had like periods of really struggling with depression or social anxiety, and I can think back to those periods and sort of normalize it for myself. But the first thing that comes up for me is that gentleman walking across the street. The second question is, what did mental illness actually look like in my life? So in my life, and what I really want to share about this is that when I was growing up, by the time I was like 10, 11, or 12, I started to exhibit obsessive compulsive behavioral patterns. And by the time I moved out of the house and into the city to go to performing arts school, I was already in the experience of a full-blown eating disorder. And when I was in school, that became like it grew exponentially. I had made a pact. So this is what it looked like in my life, is that before I went to school for performing arts, I was 18 years old. I was moving into New York for the first time, and I was registered to go to the American and Musical Dramatic Academy. This was in February of 2006. And I made a pact with myself before I moved into the city, internally, inside of my world, that yes, I was going to go and be incredibly dedicated to the experience of being in this school. I was going to get incredible training. I was going to be on time for everything. I was going to work super, super hard. But I also made the pact with myself that I was going to drop as much weight as I possibly could. And I just, with complete resolve and total control of will, said, I know how much or how little I can get away with eating and how much I can exercise, and And I'm careful about sharing the details of this period of my life because I don't actually, I'm not like pro Anna. I don't think it's like a girl's right to decide whether or not she chooses to be chooses to be anorexic or bulimic or whatever. Everyone's journey is everyone's journey, and everyone's got to go through what they've got to go through. But I do think that is a justification. That line of argument is a justification for behaviors that are totally self-destructive, and there is a lack of awareness of like who we really are and what life really is in order for people to pursue that line of logic or argument. So I won't share in detail about the sort of things I was doing to my body, but I will share what the experience was like in my mind. And so when I was 18 and I moved into the city, that was my resolve. That's what mental illness looked like for me. My resolve was I'm going to drop this much weight, or I'm going to drop as much weight as possible, and this is how I'm going to do it. And when I moved in, that's exactly what I did. And so enrolling in performing arts school for me was just as much about being able to go home and show my parents and family and friends from high school how thin I could become, how much I could evaporate my body, and how scared I could make them, for how much I could get people to fear for my life, as it was about being an artist. It was actually, it became more about that than it was about being an artist. The other experience that I want to share about how mental illness occurred for me is that when I made the switch from experiencing anorexia into practicing binging and purging, there was a point after which I started to binge and purge when in my mind I saw the choice, am I going to go down this road or not? Because if I choose to go all the way into this thing, I'm not taking myself with me. And I hope this isn't too vague or metaphorical, but I had the choice, and I chose the choice to take on this behavioral patterning as the totality of my life, like to lose myself. I made a choice to lose myself. And I remember thinking and knowing that I had no idea when I would get myself back, but I'd probably do it at some point. And I had no idea how long I would be lost in the disease, the dis-ease, or how long I would dead myself in order to do this, but I knew that at some point I would probably come back. That's what mental illness really looked like for me in my life. It looked like a conscious choice to be dead inside. Listen to this mind. This mind is really interesting to listen to now that I'm committed to living my life, and now that I'm committed to sharing my story and being authentic. This mind is very interesting to deal with because I let it run amok in the direction of self-destruction, my mind. So now even as whatever the I is coming back into its full expression through my life, that mind is still around and is very practiced in the self-destructive thinking. And so I'll meet people sometimes who are like, oh, you just got to stop thinking, or oh, you just think too much. And really, like, there's a whole history there. There's a whole momentum that's been built in this line of thinking for me, and I'm so glad to have a forum for sharing it. So, and I would imagine probably other people are as well, and to like give other people the opportunity to get that, like, it's not just as simple as like, oh, stop thinking so much. This is a very well practiced mechanism that exists in my mind that isn't me. Which leads me to question number 3. Question number 3 is, how do you view yourself in relationship to mental illness? And the reason that I put this question, and I shared this on the intro video, the reason I put this question in here is because I've heard a lot of people talk about it as a spiritual phenomenon, mental illness as a spiritual phenomenon, and then I've heard people talk about mental illness as if something about them is inherently sick, or I've also heard it talked about that something about the mind is inherently sick. And so as human beings, we have a responsibility to take care of that. That's like part of the human condition. The human experience is learning how to care for a sick mind that is constantly with us. And nothing bad or wrong. There's nothing bad or wrong with that the mind might be inherently sick. So I'm sure you're getting from the way that I'm speaking that I experience that there is an I, and that the I is not the body, and that the I is not the mind, and that the I is not the emotions. I experience that there is an I, and that I am that I, and that I is whole and complete and perfect, and that I is whole and that I is complete, and that everything else that we put on top of it is not really real, and that we can express authentically, and we can express from that place of I, and we can talk about conditions and things that change, and all of the things that change are not that I, but we can express from that I of the conditions that are changing, and we can express authentically, and we can talk about the conditions that are changing, but we are the I, and the I is complete, and the I is perfect, and the I is not impacted by these stories, but we are separated from the I by these stories about mental illness, by these thoughts, by the things that we believe, by our beliefs, by our choices, the choices that we make that like negate the power of that I. So I believe that there's an I, and it's perfect and complete, and everyone has it. Everyone has the I. Everyone is the I. And to varying degrees, everyone is struggling with the stuff that's not the I, and experiencing each other from varying spaces of relationship to the I, and ability to see the I in other people. And then what I believe that the mind is inherently, maybe not the mind, but like there's a part of the mind. In Buddhism it's called the ego, at Landmark it's called the act. There's a part of the mind that is like concerned with its own survival above everything else. I believe that part is not, it's not diseased in the sense that it's sick or bad, but it's diseased. It's in a constant state of dis-ease. It's just like, it's not at ease. And it's possible to experience peaceful thoughts, but that mind is, it's just not at ease. It's not at peace. And I experience mental illness as like, either as a child we are hurt and we feel like we need to protect ourselves, so we believe that mind because we've been hurt. So we've been hurt, so we say, we've been hurt, the mind tells us it's because we're bad, and we go, oh, that must be right because I am hurt, so that must be right. And that begins a whole like experience of believing the thing that is diseased. And when we really believe it in extremes, that's where mental illness comes from. So that's how I experience mental illness. That was a lot. Lastly is what worked and what didn't work for me in terms of therapies. What didn't work for me was I spent 24 hours in a psych ward. That didn't work. That it didn't work. It didn't give me anything. I didn't get anything from it. Not that I didn't get anything from it. I got something from it. I got a bunch of stuff from it, but I didn't get healing from it. I spoke to a psychiatrist when I was there, and I didn't see how that communication was going to benefit me. And I also spoke to a social worker there, and I experienced such incredible support and equanimity from that woman that I started to think about becoming a social worker. So that was powerful. And what else? What didn't work for me also was trying to enroll myself in talk therapy before I was ready for it. That didn't work for me. That was really tough, and I showed up in the space because I wasn't ready to let go of my act. Like, I wasn't ready to let go of my act at all, of the act that was keeping me separate from the world and in my mind keeping me safe. So it was very painful to go in and just experience this no, I'm not letting go of it. I really think that willingness has to be a part of people's healing. That's something that I don't know where willingness comes from. I think willingness is divine in its way. But I think people need willingness before they can really open themselves up to healing, because healing is painful. It's you deal with all the stuff that you were avoiding. It's a lot of what it is. So what did work for me? I go to this right away when I talk about what worked, because I had such a great experience with this. Somatic experiencing therapy worked so well for me because I got to be creative in it, and I'm an artist, so I like to be creative. I got to associate my feelings with colors, which that kind of stuff. So I'm a person, I don't know how many people think like this, if this is just a human condition thing, or if this is a kind of a person thinks this way, maybe an artistic or a creative person thinks this way, although we're all creative, but maybe there's a kind of thinking that this could be categorized, that this falls into. I see relationship between math and colors and science and shape and matter and people and energy and the cosmos and astrology and divinity and philosophy, and I see relationship between all things, nature and math, or music and scent. So it was really beneficial for me to have an outlet for expressing that, and to connecting some dots. So I would label my feelings a color, I would give them a color, and I could experience them moving through my body, and then I would give them a shape, and then I would give them a movement, and I was guided by a very gifted healer, Shantia Joy Smith, in that. And we also did soul retrieval meditations, and we did meditations where I was addressing all of my ancestors, and all that all of that work was very powerful and was deeply healing for me. I also got something that really, really worked was group therapy. So I really got my food together. I got myself together in relationship to my food at OA, Overeaters Anonymous, and so that really worked for me for creating a food plan. And I have because my eating disorder depended on isolation, just being in spaces with people has been incredibly transformative. Just noticing when I want to totally leave a community because I'm being asked to move into a new phase of intimacy with a group of people. Just noticing that and staying in and being up for the challenge of like processing whatever comes up, that's been incredibly transformative. So group therapy has really worked. I was never medicated. I have seen young people, I've experienced young people being medicated, and I've watched as their personality changed after being medicated. So while I was never medicated, I have I've seen members of my family and experienced members of my family as their personality shifted because of the affect of a drug, and that shift became a part of their life, and that's really scared me a lot. So, which is not to say again, it's not to say bad or wrong, but it is real, and this is not. I have no intention of demonizing pharmaceutical companies, because I don't think that anyone needs to be demonized right now. But in terms of us figuring out what's really going to work for healing and moving in that direction, we got to look at everything. And I think that's something that that really needs looking at is are pharmaceuticals working? I know that when I was on Adderall, I was taking Adderall non-prescription. I was buying it from a friend of a friend's, and I was buying it on a street corner and coordinating over text message to go and pick it up every week, and it cost a lot of money because it wasn't a prescription. And I experienced that I felt like Superman, and that I was unfazed by my emotions because I couldn't really feel them. I was so hyper and so. I really felt like I could do anything, but I was I didn't actually do anything. I created some music at home. I drank a lot of coffee. I ate really good croissants. And the Adderall honestly helped me to wean myself off of the bulimic behaviors. But it didn't help me in terms of long-term healing. So I might share this again, because for me there's a lot to share. I might do this again as an exercise. But if you feel so moved, I really invite you to share whatever comes up for you. Record it. Drop us an email at omm.onmymind@gmail.com. I think this story share is really important for people. We are all dealing with the mind and struggling with the mind to various degrees, and a forum for us to share that can really, it can disappear, it can and it will disappear the victimization of the mind, being victimized by the mind. That will disappear. We really can transform the shame that people experience around mental illness, and thinking of themselves as mentally ill, or thinking that society thinks that they are mentally ill, or that mental illness means someone is crazy or someone is hopeless and not worth it, not worthy. We can transform all of that. We can change all of that, and we're doing that. So thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. And I'll definitely share some more of these. Bye.